My name is Barnabás Málnay. I'm a partner at SmartWare.tech and a business developer at ELTE University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight at the event, The Future of FinTech, Challenges and Opportunities in the FinTech World, which is co-organized by the FinTech Meetup Budapest, the Budapest Institute of Banking, Sprintform Europe, and the Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship, CFTE, and it's of course taking place here in the Hungarian Money Museum and Visitor Center. Thank you very much for hosting us. It's a great pleasure to be here. Without further ado, and before I actually tell you what's going to await you for the rest of the evening, I would like to ask Mr. Gergely Fábián, who is Executive Director at the Central Bank of Hungary and CEO of the Budapest Institute of Banking, to deliver his opening remarks if he is around. But I cannot see him at this second. So maybe if he's not on the horizon, then maybe in the meantime, I will in fact tell you what's going to await for you after the little opening remarks. So there will be afterwards a keynote presentation by Mr. Nguyen Trieu, who is co-founder at the Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. And then we will have a panel discussion that will include Hui, and I will stop at this second, interrupting myself, and give the podium over to Gergely, who will deliver the opening remarks. Gergely, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's glad to see you. My name is Gergely Fábián. I'm an executive director of the Central Bank, and those who know me, they know me that I have two lab projects. One is education and the Budapest Institute of Banking, actually, and the second is the Money Museum. So we thought, if we are here and I'm talking with Sprintform and CFTE, put together the two things, the educational part and the Money Museum. Actually, they have a crossover as well. So the Biconomist project, which will be covered and which I will talk about a bit, it's something like a mix of education and the Money Museum. So it's available on the Money Museum website. It's a free online platform where you can get it's helping orientation of in upskilling. Whenever you have a new science, a new things, there is a short videos that explaining about all kind of aspects of the economy, finance, and entrepreneurship, technology as well. So this is how it's this event, and I'm very happy that we could organize this and we could have this, and even COVID allowed us to have this meeting. Something last November, we had a really good meeting in London with CFTE. It was very, very fruitful, very intensive content about NFT, digital assets. So when we welcomed Hui and the CFTE team in Budapest, they came here. I invited them. We thought that to have this, to have a similar meeting, a similar meetup, a similar roundtable, to the Budapest, to the Hungarian FinTech community. So thank God we could brought together, and the COVID situation allowed that. My role will be just a welcoming, and I let the experts speak. And after the roundtable, we're gonna have actually some probe of museum night. Since we're gonna have a museum night somewhere in June, but now for you an exclusive guided by me, an exclusive trip around the museum, so you can take a look around and see how we build this edutainment building, this edutainment exhibition for the people, to help them in financial literacy, financial and digital literacy. So thank you, and then I invite the people to Barnabás, please take over. And
thank you very much, Gergely. Maybe a round of applause to Gergely, who is the host and organizer. And again, as he mentioned, there will be a guided tour, a very special one, led by himself at 7:15, so a little bit after the moderated conversation, and maybe a little networking session as well. So now I would like to ask Mr. Nguyen Trieu, who is co-founder of CFTE, co-organizer and the before mentioned event as well as today's event. CFTE stands for Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. But I could go on for a very long time telling the accolades that belong to who is named. Let me just mention a few almost randomly. He is venture partner at Mundi Ventures, which is an insurtech fund. He's also founding partner of Supercharger, the largest fintech accelerator in Asia, associate fellow at Oxford and industry fellow at the Imperial College. Previously, he was MD at Citi. And I'm sure I could just go on for a very long time, but I think it's better if I just give it over to you. Please deliver your 15-minute keynote presentation. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barnabás. And hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be back in Budapest after 2 years. And very, very happy to be in this amazing museum. So my objective here is to really set the scene for the discussion after, and where we'll be talking about opportunities and challenges in FinTech. So in 15 minutes, I'll try to give you a good idea of what I think is happening to FinTech today. And I use some slides for that. So this is happening in FinTech today. So what is happening in FinTech today? So this is me. I've had the chance to be in a different worlds of FinTech, because when we think of Fin and Tech, there's a part around technology, there's a part around finance. I actually started on the technology side. I was CEO of a tech company called UKB in the US a very, very long time ago. And this morning I said that UKB was LinkedIn, but 5 years before LinkedIn. So very wrong timing. So when we'll talk about entrepreneurship, then we'll have to talk about the timing part, and this part will be quite important. After that, I fell into banking pretty much by coincidence, where I was at SocGen, ABS, and Citi, where my last role was a managing director at Citi, head of structuring, and that was the more, let's call that, traditional side of finance. And at some point, there was this combination between Fin and Tech, and it became FinTech, and it was at Oxford, etc., but also at CFTE now. And perhaps, let me ask you a question in terms of the audience. From which world, are you coming from? Are you from the FinTech side or from the startup side? Who would be more from the startup side? So a few people from the startup side. Are you more from the bank side? Okay, so quite a few people more from the banking side. And so central bank, I guess. So a few. Other? What is other? Okay, interactive brokers. Okay, so it's, we don't really know if it's FinTech or bank or in between. Okay, that also shows what's happening in financial services today, I think, in terms of this convergence. Okay, let me first tell you a bit about CFTE and why we did CFTE. So CFTE, we're a global corporate university in FinTech and digital finance. And the reason why we did it is very simple. This world of finance is growing very, very quickly. It requires skills which are different, which are very, very linked to technology. There was a gap, and that's the reason why we created CFTE, with the idea of giving everybody the skills that they need in this new world of finance. And we have the chance of being in a lot of places around the world, quite a bit in Asia, in Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, for example, in the Middle East, but also we have the chance of having this great partnership here in Budapest with BIB and MNB, where we've been working together for the last few years, first on artificial intelligence in finance, and 2 years ago on creating this very, very good course on digital payments. So very, very happy to be here in Budapest today. And the way that we do our delivery is through online courses, and I think exactly the same mission as BIB in terms of how do we make sure that as many people as possible have the right skills. So now, what can we learn from the last few years in FinTech? And so what are the last few years? I would say the last few years would be the last 5 or 7 years. What we know is that this is a process that has unfolded quite quickly, actually, during the last few years. Because for those in the industry, you might remember that the last few years, 5 years ago, we were talking about unbundling of financial services. We were saying that those large banks that had a lot of services, then we started to see a lot of startups getting into the space, and what they were doing is that they were starting to compete on some very, very narrow verticals, cheaper, better, faster, with the idea of doing something better, for example, on the lending side, or investment side, or FX side, or payment side. And then you had thousands and thousands of those fintech startups. So this was the unbundling part of finance that started, let's say, 5-7 years ago. But this is very, very mature already. Today, where are we? We're far from this. We're now at the level of rebundling. Now we have seen a lot of those companies, whether the Revolut or N26 or Chime in the US, for example, which have done really well in terms of acquiring a lot of clients, and what they're doing is that they're rebundling. So when we look at financial services, now we are at a totally different stage from 5 years ago. We can see how quickly things have happened. A lot of money has been invested in fintech. Who knows how much money has been invested in fintech startups over the last 10 years? Any number? 1 million, 1 billion, 100 billion, 1 trillion? Anybody has a view? How much? Billion. So yeah, you're in the billion. You've had 300 billion invested in fintech over the last 10 years. And what I can tell you is that it's incredible. When we were here in 2014, in the industry, everybody was saying, that's amazing, we have tripled the amount of money. We went from 3 billion, 4 billion to 12 billion. And look, 10 years later, where we are, basically, we're 10 times that amount. So a lot of money has been invested. Whether it continues or not, we don't really know, but we know that the trend of more and more basically initiatives in fintech is not stopping. That led to what? That led to very, very large companies. Now we have almost 300 fintech unicorns, so almost 300 companies which are worth more than $1 billion. And new asset classes, for example, the total cryptocurrency market, which is a new asset class, is starting to be very, very big. So what is happening in financial services? Because we're talking about fintech, but the reality is that fintech is just a part of financial services. It's not something which is different from financial services. So this is happening in financial services, which is that finance, now, like pretty much all industries, is driven by technology. And so this graph, I like this graph because it gives quite a clear view of what is happening in terms of innovation. There's the part which is now, what is happening today, and there's the part which is what might happen in the future. But then innovation is not always the same. You have the part on innovation which is incremental. Innovation that allows you to do things which you do today, and faster, cheaper, better. That's typically, for example, using digital to do, let's say, in a challenger bank, for example. And on the other side, you have purely disruptive innovations, things that allow you to do things which you couldn't really do before. And so if you look at what we've seen over the last few years, we've seen a lot of this now already. Basically, using modern technologies to make banking much, much more digital. That comes from cloud, API, microservices, etc. RPA, machine learning is a very, very big part of this. At the same time, we're starting to see things which are quite disruptive also. What is disruptive? Things that we didn't really see before in finance. Cryptocurrencies, of course, really, really new. But open banking, very, very new in terms of business models and the way that the value chain of finance is happening. And so finance is totally driven by technology. If you look at the biggest and best players in the industry, they all use all of this. What is interesting, of course, is that the trend is not complete yet. So we know that there's going to be more on artificial intelligence. Now we're moving into deep learning, for example. We're moving into intelligent automation. And at the same time, for example, on things linked to the blockchain, we're going to have more on ledgers, more on CBDCs, etc. So finance is driven by technology. That means that the large financial institutions have changed also over the last 10 years. So 10 years ago, the 10 largest financial institutions were all banks. So all mainly Chinese and American banks. Do you know how many in the top 10 are banks today? 3? 4? Who says better? It's 5. So we have 5. So we have 5 amongst the top 10 financial institutions, which are non-banks. So they are companies like Visa, MasterCard, which are more on the credit card side, but also PayPal, Tencent, and financial. So we're seeing things changing, even at the highest level of financial institutions. And FinTech in itself is now quite a big industry. So if we're thinking of FinTech startups, it's quite a big industry. If you look at the market cap of the 100 largest banks in the world, it's $7 trillion. If you look at the market cap of the 100 largest FinTech companies, it's $3 trillion, almost. So it's almost 40%. Quite interesting, 10 years ago it was pretty much nothing. It was around 2 or 3%. So we've seen that growing really, really quickly. And then FinTech is also a very, very big employer. If you were to count the number of jobs of people employed in FinTech today compared to, for example, the number of people employed in London, so 400,000 people are employed in financial services in London, 300,000 people are employed in FinTech globally. So what you're seeing is that FinTech, if it was a city, would be a very, very big city. What do we know from all of this? And here I think it is really, really important, because here I've talked a lot about FinTech as of FinTech startups. The reality is that my view is that in 5 to 10 years, we're not going to have FinTech startups and banks and tech companies, etc. It's going to be the same. In the same way as when we talk about e-commerce today, we're not really talking about different types of e-commerce. So it's going to be the same. So FinTech at this stage is an intermediary stage which has grown very, very quickly on the path for finance in the digital world. So this is where we are today already. And so what is important now that we know where we are today? What is a strategy for FinTech? And here I'm really at a whole different level. No strategy for an organization, for example, for a bank, or strategy for a FinTech company, or strategy for you as an individual. What is the best strategy for FinTech? So going back to my example of timing, there's always the question of, there are always amazing things, but is it the right time or not? And clearly, timing is right for anybody who wants to be in the industry, for any organization that wants to be in the industry. We're pretty much in the middle of it. This transformation that started 5 or 7 years ago, I would say, we're pretty much in the middle of it. In the next 5 to 10 years, we will reach the level of digital finance the way it should be. So timing is everything. Like we say in trading, the trend is your friend. The trend has been like this. There's no reason why it's going to stop over the next 10 years. COVID did a lot to accelerate this trend. Clearly, we cannot underestimate the trend for COVID. For example, just in terms of digital e-commerce, in 2 years, actually, we gained pretty much 10 years at the previous pace. So COVID has hugely accelerated the trend, which is definitely a very good news. What is a very good news also for example, Budapest, is that before it used to be the domination of the international hubs, whether it's London or Singapore or the Silicon Valley. What we've seen, especially over the last few years, is that we're starting to see local ecosystems leading to basically very, very large unicorns. So now, in terms of being in the large global hubs, of course, it's still important, but at the same time, the expertise, the knowledge, the technology is so widely available, and much more importantly, consumer adoption has risen a lot, that we're seeing a lot of local hubs which have risen very, very quickly. And then finally, and I'd like to finish on this part on timing, it is open to everyone. And this is something which is interesting, because when we talk about FinTech, a lot of people would say, yeah, but I don't really know anything about finance or technology, or I know nothing about finance and technology. But if you remember, for example, how it was at the beginning of Google, almost anybody who was slightly curious and proactive could have joined Google by just understanding a bit more than other people. Now that Google is a very, very large company, of course, it's really hard to get into Google. But at the beginning of an industry, it's open to everyone. But it's open to everyone if you have the right skills. And this, I cannot overemphasize this part in terms of the skills. And I'll just remind you of this. which when WhatsApp was acquired by Facebook for $19 billion, which was a few years ago, do you know how many people were working for WhatsApp at the time? Anybody? 1,000, 10? No, 60. Yes, I think it's 50 or 60. So that's exactly this. So it was a company that had 900 million users and 50 people. So in terms of skills, everything in the tech world, this is definitely the case. And so for us to understand what are the skills which are important in FinTech, we launched actually a big report, which we co-authored with Tram, which is the FinTech job report, where we looked at the 40,000 jobs in the industry, in FinTech. You can find it for free on our website, or buy it on Amazon if you want. And what was the findings that we got from the FinTech job report? The finding was this, which is that you have a lot of jobs, but actually you can pretty much put them in some big categories. And those big categories are here in 3 big parts. The first one, the red ones, are tech roles that you normally find in tech companies, such as engineering or data science. The blue part is non-tech roles that you find in tech companies, for example, partnerships or sales and business development. And after that, you have the roles that you'd normally find in financial services. So I'm doing the conclusion very, very quickly, but this is what we found. Really, really important. Really important, why? Because whether you're a FinTech startup, whether you're a bank, whether you're an individual, if it is the future of finance, then you'd better be prepared and have the right skills for those kind of roles. So this is what we found. What is interesting is not just those number of roles, but how many in terms of volume. And this is what we found, which is that FinTech today, in terms of the number of roles, 80% of them are more like tech companies. So what you see in gray here are the tech roles in tech companies, blue are the non-tech roles in tech companies, and red are the roles of financial services. And so FinTech, if you think of FinTech as an industry, then FinTech is much closer to a tech industry than to a finance industry. That has a lot of impacts in terms of you as an individual, in terms of you as a recruiter, in terms of you as a central bank. There's so many implications in terms of that. But what is very clear, or at least for me, it's very clear, I think this is the way where financial services is going. When all the banks are saying we're tech companies, the reality is that this is the model where we're going, where at some point, it's not really about finance utilizing technology anymore. It's that all industries will be technology industries because they are very, very heavily using technology, and there will be a vertical, which is financial services, which is the reason why we see a lot of tech companies get into finance, for example. And so what does it mean in terms of the skills? And in terms of the skills, again, you as an individual or in terms of hiring people, what we've seen is that, and by talking to a lot of, for example, FinTech entrepreneurs, we always ask them, what is the single most important challenge that you have in hiring people? Across industry knowledge, soft skills, mindset, hard skills, and experience. And normally, what they reply, most of them, it's industry knowledge, because FinTech, the reality is really, really different from traditional finance, and mindset. The part which is thinking like an entrepreneur, improvising when things go wrong, for example, like before. This is this part which we see quite a lot. So what is the future of FinTech? Let me recap the future of FinTech. The trend is your friend. It's not going to stop. Over the next 5 to 10 years, the transformation of financial services into a digital industry is not stopping. So if you're in the world of FinTech, whether in a startup, whether in a bank, a central bank, a tech company, definitely, it's not stopping. Choose your battle. Choose your battle. Are you more on the incremental side, better, cheaper, faster, or are you more on the disruptive side? Basically, are you using machine learning to do things faster, or are you using cryptocurrencies to reinvent the world? Really, really different in terms of business model, in terms of the way you're going to grow your company, but really interesting. And at the end of the day, make sure that you have the right skills, whether you're an individual or a recruiter, because it's really different from what we have seen in the past. And so I'll finish on this, because I truly believe that. I've said it for the last few years. This is the most exciting time to be in financial services. So good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was a great keynote, and we will actually engage Hui in a conversation. Not just myself, but maybe you will have a chance to ask questions as well. But before we get there, I will not introduce the other 4 speakers who will be in the panel. Rather than that, they will introduce themselves very, very briefly, and they will use the rest of their 3 minutes each to get to the thicket of the topic that we're covering today. They will each say one very remarkable opportunity that they see on the horizon in the fintech world, and one challenge, or maybe a small set of opportunities and challenges. I will go in alphabetical order, so I would like to first ask Mr. Viktor Bodnar, who is CEO of BENKER, the first blockchain financial institution in Europe, and he is also co-founder and CEO of BlockBan and Natrix. And please stick to the 3 minutes so we have enough time to talk afterwards. And I would like to ask someone to get to the slides of Viktor, or maybe I will ask Viktor himself to do that with the help of the presenter. Yeah, does it work? Great. Thank you.
Yes, works. Thank you. Thank you. So my name is Viktor Bodnar. I'm the CEO of BENKER. As I was introduced, the first blockchain-based financial institution in the European Union. Just reflecting on a few slides, I'm a project and program manager by trade. And I started working in the fintech industry 5 years ago. Initially working on the virtual asset and cryptocurrency side. Then we ended up having to learn blockchain development ourselves. It took us over 4 years and 5-6 million euros of our own money to come up with Natrix. That's a hybrid blockchain system designed for the financial industry, especially focusing on GDPR, bank secrecy, and regulatory requirements. And we've just got licensed with BENKER in Lithuania, and hopefully we are going live in the 3rd quarter. So looking at the fintech industry, I was asked to name one challenge. Noticing on the keynote speaking, in my view, one of the biggest challenges we have, and that's pretty much everyone I think is facing on the market, is finding the suitable talents for such organization. And that comes from numerous reasons, as I highlighted. Looking at the old school and new school approach, this basically goes to the work environment as well as technological environment, how associates were developed and how they started their work life. So looking at talents, especially in the IT bits, in their mid-20s towards their early 30s, they would consider the new school. We found it pretty hard to integrate them into financial system development. So looking at a regulated institution, especially from an accounts, from a transparency and from a reporting perspective, that's not something an average 20-some-year-old would have faced. Whereas on the other side, other developers who have built financial systems for banks, they would be probably more on the conservative side. So ending fintech and coming up with something that like Natrix, it was a lot of work to integrate these two bits of the team, but it's a very different approach in my view. COVID, from a business perspective with other ventures, it did help us. I'm not sure we can say we are proud of it, but obviously it did help us financially. Anything that works with digitalization and financial industry, I think it could have benefited from e-commerce as well, cryptos, virtual assets. But looking at from a hiring perspective, it's hard to afford and find someone locally who can actually work now in Amsterdam or San Fran for a startup, and it's hard to keep up with those wages. And sustainability comes from a recruitment bit. It means that the proactive recruitment approach that happens especially in the IT industry, that in our view led to an enormous inflation in wages, and that's been happening in the last 5-7 years, and I think it does have a question in sustainability. Looking at an opportunity, so what we do with BENKER is, and that's what we found with a lot of research, that the financial industry, we're bringing trust to a new level. So basically, with our services, we will not be advocating and we will not be advertising and we will not enter a market as a blockchain institution, but we will be providing clients with a new level of trust. So what we call the circle of guarantees. So looking at the financial industry itself, up until today or up until in the recent time, you would have had legal, institutional guarantees in place and regulatory guarantees, but technology was not in place yet. By adding blockchain into the financial industry on a regulated level, we hold the opinion that the circle of guarantees gets completed, and that's a new era in finance. And thank you. I hope I wasn't too long. Okay.
Maybe you can just put it down, and the presenter as well, if you can just please leave it on the table. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite back Huy to come back and crystallize his main views on opportunities and challenges. And please bring up the 2 slides, or maybe I will. There you go. Do you want this one? Cool.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Don't worry, I won't say the same thing as I just said. So opportunity. There were so many opportunities. So I didn't want to write all of them. I tried to focus on a few, going from incremental to disruptive. So from incremental, there's one very clearly, which is digital first. I think we're still a long way of having a finance which is digital. So a lot of the activities that we see in financial services can be digitalized. And what is the best tool or the most important tool for that? Artificial intelligence. So I think artificial intelligence really at the core of the transformation of the industry. So whether you are an individual, again, or an organization, I think digital and AI is one. The second one, in terms of a sector, there's a sector I really love, which is SME. So the SME sector, which is always underserved in a lot of countries for a lot of reasons, but just because it's hard to have all those companies which are not really individuals or not a lot of people, but not like very large organizations, are underserved. But technology allows you to have actually clients who are willing to pay and who will really value your service. So SMEs is a very good sector, and we're starting to see some very nice success stories. Open banking and digital platforms, and the fact that if we think of open banking, just think of what happened when the iPhone and the whole ecosystem basically changed the world of mobile forever. I think it is happening at the moment also in financial services. And then much more disruptive, of course, it's going to have to be on the crypto side. But I think what is really missing on the crypto side is what I would call the UX part of crypto in general, which is if someone could make any kind of services on crypto which are easy for people to use and to understand, which are safe, there would be a big opportunity. There's a lot of other ones, but here from incremental to more disruptive. What are the challenges? So I wanted to put the challenges at the level of different stakeholders: a country, financial institutions, startup, and as a person. What are the main challenges? I think for country, the main challenge, upskilling, and I think there would agree a lot with BIB. How do we make sure that we have people who have the right skills to make this transformation? That is a given. Everybody knows that. The question is, how do we make it happen? Financial institution, complacency. I was in a financial institution before. Large organizations, they have a lot of money. It's really hard to make the transformation. It requires a lot of effort. It's very simple. It's very easy to be complacent. So I think that's the biggest challenge. For startup, hiring, so perhaps I would have the same as the previous challenge that we discussed about. And as a person, I would say, get started. There's this world which is moving and growing very quickly. Make sure you're on board the train. Don't fall behind, because once you're behind, it's really hard to be back in the train. So for a person, let's get started. That would be mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, I'll take everything from you. And thank you also for respecting the time limit. I would like to ask the other panelists to do the same. Now I would like to introduce Ms. Tram and Nguyen, who is also a co-founder of CFTE, because CFTE doesn't have a single founder, but it has two founders. She is also board member of various fintech associations and forums, including EDHEC, the ACT, the Global Impact FinTech or GIFT Forum, and she is an entrepreneurship expert at the Said Business School at the University of Oxford and an industry fellow at Imperial College. She's also one of the top 10 women transforming tech and one of the top 22 key opinion leaders in FinTech globally. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much, Taman.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's a great pleasure. So the challenge is 3 minutes. So I don't know if I will get a chance, but let's start. So I think the challenge that I face, so perhaps I'll in 1 minute include, talk about a little bit myself, but my world is not fintech. I'm a traditional finance also. My background, I used to be a trader in capital markets in New York, and then build the emerging market desk for Dresner in London, and made a shift from capital markets then to wealth management, where I was advising clients for UBS, and made a shift advising family offices. I fell into fintech. So today I'm leading some of the projects in fintech in education, working with governments, central banks, and partnering also with startups, CEOs, organizations to really think of how do we encourage upskilling, reskilling, talent. And my question, and I will ask you the question, is could we transform the industry without transforming people? So that's the question. So think about the question. But for me is the challenges is what is the biggest challenge to transformation? For me, there's no doubt. If you look, and this is a survey that was done by McKinsey, and McKinsey surveyed and asked the senior leaders, what is the biggest challenges that you see? And most of the people would say that it's linked to people, skills and mindset. The second challenges would be from processes and businesses, IT, and then the smallest one is money. So if you look at these challenges, what is the biggest challenges to transformation? For me, it's not about the money. For me, it's not about technology. It's not about organization structure and processes, but it's about transforming people. And so to the question of can we transform organizations or industry without transforming people, we all agree it's a no. So that's the hardest and the most challenging time at the moment that we're facing for everyone, is how do you make sure that we can get a lot of people to join this new world of finance. The opportunities now that I see, and of course, I won't repeat what we were saying, my co-founder, but we're really, really happy to have worked with the whole community of fintech companies by spending time with the 225, and now they're 300, but fintech unicorns. And what we did is an analysis of the top 40,000 jobs that didn't even exist a couple of years ago. And this job, it was really hard for the industry. And now if you work with and you survey the industry, what are those taxonomy of jobs? What are those jobs that are being created but no one knows about? And when you look, as Wim was mentioning, that is a growing industry. It's 2.8 trillion, which is now 40%, including in the financial services. This is the fintech industry. It's not niche anymore. It's an industry on its own, and is hiring more people than people think. So if you were comparing the top two largest financial services in the world, which is New York hiring 400,000 people, London 350,000 people, today the fintech industry could be considered as a city, 300,000 people hiring with 40,000 job posting compared to finance, which is 10,000. So opportunities are huge. For anyone who wants to join the fintech industry, this is the best moment. So I would love to discuss, of course, more, in the discussion with all of you. But I think for me, the best opportunities for anyone could be the central bank, a bank, a government, or a startup, or an individual, please look at the fintech industry as an industry you can work in. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Traman. And indeed, we will come back to these questions during the discussion. Please don't take our presenter away. We will need it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I would like to ask Mr. János Pereczes, who is Managing Director at Magyar Bankholding and at Foundation, also Managing Director responsible for digital at MKB Bank still. Is that true? Oh, kind of. Thanks. Yeah, you can use this one and here's the
Very good. I have the simpler sides. Hey everyone, my name is János again, and I work for an organization called Hungarian Bankholding, which is an owner of 3 Hungarian banks, MKB Bank, Takarék Bank, and Budapest Bank. Technically, we have merged the second and the first MKB and Budapest Bank into together in the 1st of April. My job is to build the 4th bank. So what we believe in is that instead of an incremental transformation from within the bank, we decided that we're going to build a radically new bank through a business model transformation, a cultural transformation, and new tech. And this is foundation. So we stole the motto from Asimov. What we're doing is basically we're building a planet, which at the end will bring back all the knowledge to the legacy and transform the legacy by building actually a new bank. And I'm responsible for this mini bank inside this big bank. And the challenges and the opportunities are broad. The challenge is overfishing in the digital finance ocean. So this is what I see as an employer who's trying to hire like 100 developers, 50 designers and 20 product owners. Is that everybody is trying to build a fintech, everybody is trying to build digital finance and transform the local and global industry, but there's not so many fishes in the ocean. So I think this is a big challenge. I just emphasize the talents part, but it's also from the customers part. Everybody's talking about building a new super app and build the first touch point with the customers. But actually, if you ask yourselves how many platforms they use day by day, it's not more than 3 or 4, or maybe it's 2, Slack and your email platform. So I think not everybody will succeed to be a super bank and to be a super app. It's the biggest challenge to actually have the right talent and the attention of the customers. And the opportunity for me also as Viktor, who maybe stole my slides, I don't know, but it's becoming the guardian of trust. So when it comes to money, I think it's not personal messaging. It's not like sending a GIF over a chat platform. It's our saving. It's the day-to-day finances that we have. It's the money that we put together for the new home. I think this is something that you have to have trust in to have your full attention towards the digital or a physical or whatever financial institution. And I think the first couple of players who will actually crack this code, how to become on one hand very digital and be there when embedded finance and everything, but also be trustable, they will be gaining big money on the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Jani. Thank you very much. I have a clear conscience. We didn't share your slides with anyone in advance. I now would like to ask Ms. Aniko Szombati, who is the Chief Digital Officer at the National Bank of Hungary. She's responsible for digitalization and fintech development. Please share us what your thoughts on the main challenges and opportunities are. Thank you very much. Mike?
Thank you. So, as a matter of fact, I agree with all former speakers about challenges and opportunities, and I try to bring in some more systemic perspectives. So some of you have already seen these slides, which we describe how the financial services are developing actually, and what are the main directions which can dominate finance in the near future. We don't know actually the exact proportions, but all three are already present, and nobody yet knows who will be the winner. But still, I would say that all of three offers different opportunities for fintechs as a whole. So as the underlying scenario, we could also foresee the continuous influential role of incumbents so that the banks can transform themselves, of course, with the help of fintechs, to be more relevant, to be more user-centric, and of course to be instant in all aspects. For this, the central bank actually last year has issued also a recommendation where we identified 10 different kinds of areas where banks can really transform themselves and being not only client-facing activities, but those boring stuff like core systems or risk management or data warehouses. So this can be one opportunity, but the other newly coming up sector, decentralized finance, can also offer possibilities. Of course, blockchain experts are in advance, but everyone can set up companies, provide services. Unfortunately, these activities are not regulated yet, so that we are not sure that the customers are served under safe and resilient conditions always, but this has become really popular, well-financed area. And as a third, I would mention the rise of central bank digital currencies, where all the central banks who are in this development are aiming at having strong partnership from the commercial banks, from the fintechs, from payment service providers, who can build innovative new services on the newly upcoming platforms created by the central banks. And about the challenges, I just put up here the share prices of the share price development of UiPath. Actually, we in Hungary, we don't have a unicorn yet, but we have the region as it is, have one who had the IPO just 1 year ago, and who had to suffer this more or less loss of value during this year. And this happened when nothing really went wrong with the company. So the experts are there, the owner is there, and they are just doing their best. But still, the valuation is shrinking because the capital markets are fierce. They have to be constantly innovative, maybe disruptive. They have to search for the best talents, of course, and they have to realize all those growth prospects that the shareholders believed in. And so this is only maybe 1% of the fintechs, but the other 99% also have to face the new reality of changing interest rate environment and worsening financing conditions. So we at the Central Bank of Hungary are really supporting fintechs Hungary and worldwide, but we see a little bit of a glimpse picture for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and please don't go anywhere, not just because of the presenter, but also because I would like to ask you to join the panel together with everyone else who presented in the past 15 or 20 minutes. Please take a seat anywhere. Thank you very much. So later on, I will definitely give you a chance, the audience, to ask questions, but I will start with a few of my own. So please think in the meantime what you would like to ask and whom. So maybe we can come back to the foundations, and that is talent. So Tram and you argued that if we want to have any sort of transformation, we will have to start with transformation of people. So there are various questions that we're going to ask about it, especially that this report, the FinTech job report, has just recently been published. So we're really interested in maybe some other insights that came out of this report. And then I can also ask, or we can also ask some specific questions about it. So are there any other insights that you guys would like to share with us that didn't fit into the short introductions?
Yes, I think
And please use the microphones. There are only 2 for you. I won't give mine to anyone because then I cannot stop you if I need to.
Hello, can you hear?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Now, yes.
Yes, excellent. No, I think if there was one thing, because I spend time and we spend time also to share about, what this FinTech job report is about. I think if there was one thing, and I know some of you are in the bank, some of you, are in the startup, some of you may consider, a career in FinTech. The reality is that when I was in the world of finance, the way that people were hiring was really, really similar. You have, to go through a certain career path. You have to go through a certain, path for you to accelerate your career. Today in FinTech, my view is that pretty much anyone can join the world of FinTech and the new world of finance in general. And it's really, really through the lens of this report that we have seen this, is that the skills that are really in demand today are not the same skills as when you were hiring in a bank. When I was in a bank, in capital markets or wealth management, family offices, you had to understand finance. Today, if you are contemplating working for a FinTech company, or you are contemplating about joining the future of finance, I think it's really, really, really different. Today, anyone with the right hard knowledge, so hard skills, it's having, fluent in, this new world of finance, talking about blockchain, talking about AI. All this hard knowledge is important to get, but that's quite easy. You just have to learn. The soft skills are very, very important. When I was a trader, I've never been tested about my collaboration or my teamwork, skills. Today, if you are working in a FinTech company or even for a bank, because the world is in building stage, I think the most important is to have those extra soft skills. Teamwork, collaboration, it's really, really important. Adaptability, being agile, really, really important. More than that, today, I think the most crucial skills that a lot of FinTech companies or even anyone are looking for is mindset. I think compared to before, I think the most, if you really want to be part of the future of finance, I think thinking like an entrepreneur. Thinking like an entrepreneur. Not necessarily, I'm not asking you guys to quit your job and being an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurship is really hard, but thinking to build things. And this is something that, as I used to be in traditional finance, is not something I've learned. So now today there are ways where you can really develop those skills. How do I think like an entrepreneur? And you can really, you have entrepreneurs here, they would agree, that mindset of and thinking like an entrepreneur is really, really important. And my fourth thing, and I will stop there, it's work experience. Have that curiosity of saying, I understand what's happening in the FinTech industry. There's so much knowledge out there, from LinkedIn to blogs to events like this one, You have so much happening. Be curious, because the world is really, really moving fast and there's so much to learn. And the conclusion of the FinTech report, because I'm inviting you to download it, it's available to everyone, is that today, more than anything else, is not about finance that is important. If you were contemplating to join a FinTech company, I think you must understand technology. That's why we call our report, it's quite hard, Technology is Eating Finance. If you don't know how to work and the new ways of working and use the digital tools, I think it will be very, very hard for you to get into any industry today. But I was, talking to a colleague this morning. I'm not saying that people should learn about coding. When I was a trader, I didn't invent Excel, but I learned how to use Excel. Today, AI is coming. I'm not asking you to learn how to create AI, but try to use AI. This is the best moment in our time. Today, AI is the best tool that could allow you to do a lot of things that is required, whether you work for a central bank, a startup, or any of your function, being in finance or any industry. Today, understanding technology and develop those and know how to use it, because we have now case studies to show how to use it.
Thank you very much. Does this mean, I'm wondering, that there's a fiercer competition between all kinds of players for the same kind of talent, more than it was before? And I'm wondering actually the take of all of you on this. So are you at the Central Bank of Hungary competing for the same talent that you are competing at BENKER and so on? What is your impression? Is it a clear yes? Are your lives more difficult now?
Do you hear me? Good. It's a clear yes, but I will actually, maybe I refer to something as Tram mentioned, because my job is to actually build a digital organization which is inside a traditional organization. And there's so many aspects. And you mentioned like the cultural and the mindset and the entrepreneurship thinking and things like that. It's just so many aspects. Like, traditionally a bank is built like a pyramid, like decisions and knowledge, like the higher up you go, the more decisions they make. And traditionally fintechs and digital players, they move fast because, they delegate decisions, they build autonomous teams, and the whole working model is different. And just what I mentioned is that I think, sorry to not answer your question, because I will answer your question. Yes, we're fighting for the same talent, but actually what I'm trying to mean is that as a traditional organization, even if you are successful in this fight, the fight only begins, and that is my job. You know what I mean? So you succeed for hiring the best full stack engineer, and you steal them from Facebook, you steal them from a local fintech like Bodnar or whatever. But actually, if you work in traditional finance, and I see some faces who work in central bank and banks and everything, this is where the job actually starts. You need to create an environment, you need to create a working model where they can actually create value inside your organization, and they start transforming. If you don't do that, 3 months after you fighted your fight for Facebook and block ban, they will leave your organization and go somewhere else. So it's just like that. And there's so many aspects, like from the culture, the workspace, from everything. So it's a great job.
May I ask just one quick follow-up question? So in that percentage-wise or however, how many people could you rely on for building the digital bank from MKB? Is it, so could you recruit your people from your former job, or?
There's a couple of aspects to this one. So I think anybody who has worked in an organization, there is a tendency that 10 or 5% of the organization actually run and change the organization. The other ones are still there and creating value, but what I mean is that, I'm the CEO and I have a really difficult question. Usually it's like if you have 100 people, it's 5 or 10 people that comes to mind who can solve big challenges. So it's the same for MKB, the Hungarian Bankholding itself is 11,000 employees, 5,000 of them work in call centers and branches and everything, so 6,000 in the main office. So how many of that? 6,600, but it's not 600. So it's 100 people who can change a bank actually. And this is when it comes, the culture comes in. Building a digital bank, you have to have the empathy and the openness to actually forget what you have known for the last 20 years. So for example, what we did is that we're building this new bank from the core up. So it's not a digital bank, it's not an application, it's a bank. So we selected a new core system, and the new core system, it's called Thought Machine, and the product is Volt. They are a unicorn based in UK, and the guys, they exited Google trying to build this new core system that we selected. And the mindset they build this new core system with and how it works is really, really different than the traditional big systems, bank renowned like OTP, MKB, and all the big banks. And my colleagues, accounting, there's 100 guys in accounting, 10 of them open, to have the openness to actually rethink how they work from the core up. It's not so many people. And this is when it's just not even the digital talent, it's just the internal talent who have the openness and the empathy to change and to rethink how a bank works. So it's a big change.
Thank you, I understand. So CFTE has some joint courses with the Budapest Institute of Banking as well, or I don't know whether it's in the planning phase or it's already ongoing, but maybe if you can tell us about it a little bit. I don't know whether Gergely will chip in or not, but definitely the people who are sitting here with me.
Gergely, do you want to talk about it? No, so it's a long story. It's a long love story with BIB, where we've been discussing for a while. We're in Singapore, 2-3 years ago, where we talked about all those amazing things that were happening, and then with the transformation in Hungary about instant payment, etc. We said there's really this world which is changing, which is around digital payments. And so how do we do this? Now, how do we make sure that everybody in the industry understands what is digital payments? And that's how we embark onto this basically project of creating this specialization, so this basically different courses around digital payments, which is really, really good. It's not because we built it, but I think it's a really, really good course because it goes from the foundation of what is money, because I think it's really hard to talk about payments, etc., without understanding the foundations. Pretty much, I guess if we had the museum at that time, we would have had the first part here in the museum and talking about the stack of payment into the regulation, the new products, the new business models, transformation, etc. I think what was really good, so we did it over COVID, so that was really good to do it remotely during COVID, but even during that time, we got more than 30 experts who are really, really good people from all types of companies, from large banks like Standard Chartered, for example, from fintech companies like N26, from foundations and charities, for example, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so after doing this, we launched it a bit more than a year ago at the Singapore FinTech Festival. And that became really, really good for the industry to be able to have this reference course for anyone to understand what is digital payments today.
Thank you. Did you want to comment, Gergely, or no? That was really all that we wanted to know about this. At this point, thank you very much. Aniko, I'm turning to you now, and I'm wondering how the role of central banks in general, and maybe the Hungarian Central Bank, is changing in the world where fintechs come from 3% to 38% of all the value created in the financial industry. Yeah, maybe just that, and then maybe I will ask a follow-up question.
Okay, so actually the Central Bank of Hungary has been quite a pioneer in exploring the possibilities in the fintech phenomena. So we already started deep dive into this topic around 2017, and in 2019 the management of the central bank decided that they want to devote an executive directorate into, on the one hand, incentivizing the digital transformation of the incumbents, and on the other hand, to support the prudent growth of the Hungarian fintech sector, and of course welcoming all international fintechs to become active in Hungary and in Budapest especially. And so by now, we are not only having all our support, but we are partnering with FinTech because we are developing our own chatbots, we are developing our own mobile applications. So we have first-hand experience on how to realize innovative projects with the help of Hungarian FinTechs, and some of them are not even from Budapest, so we are very proud of that.
And there's never a conflict of interest in this. So on the one hand, you're a promoter of fintech companies, but on the other hand, you're a regulator as well. So you're sort of boosting them, helping them, but at the same time, you have to make sure that they're in the right place.
So actually, you need a proper governance to solve this problem. So as I said, we are an independent area dedicated for this purpose, and we have a very close cooperation with our supervisory colleagues in this building, who are having the strong and conservative mindset on what is allowed and what is not, and we are operating kind of mediators between the supervisors and the fintechs, and understand their problems and try to resolve it with the most progressive and open way.
Okay, here's another provocative follow-up question that was suggested to me by the special report in the Economist last week about sort of the expansion of the role of central banks in general in the world. So it's not about the Hungarian National Bank. So basically the argument is that central banks tend to sort of assume new tasks, and the remit of central banks are expanding every year as it's trying to cope with different crises. And actually the growth of fintech companies itself puts a lot of new tasks on your shoulders, regulatory and so on. Do you have any hard nights not being able to sleep because of these new burdens that you will have?
So just to refer back to the question on searching for talents and attracting them. So here at the central bank, what we can have as a motivating factor to have very specific tasks and objectives is like safeguarding the financial or price stability for Hungary at any circumstances, or to implement brand new central bank activities, promote financial inclusion or digital financial inclusion and things like that. So just to refer back to your question, central banks has a reputation to have an excellent competency, not only in finance, but also in broader terms, in terms of resolving unstructured problems very quickly. And on top of that, the central banks has a huge balance sheet, so that also gives a lot of opportunity. And it's the structure of the actual government what determines what is left for the central bank and what is not. So, for example, the Central Bank of Hungary is one of the first European central banks to have a definite green mandate, but this mandate is also about supporting government activities in this direction. So we have to cooperate, and since money is everywhere, we can find tasks almost everywhere.
Does this mean that there are more and more people working for the central bank, that because there are more tasks to do?
Yes, but we are also becoming more effective and more digitalized.
Thank you very much. Victor, I'm turning to you now. So trust was a keyword that appeared both in your short presentation and in Jani's short presentation. What sort of solution does BENKER give you? You started to talk about this at the beginning, but maybe we can dig a little deeper. How does blockchain come handy for that?
In the past few years, past 4 or 5 years, we found that I start from a blockchain perspective initially. So an average user would not have too much relation to blockchain itself. What we found through research and through experience, that users do value and do appreciate the benefits what blockchain offers to the community, to the society, and to the financial system. So basically what we found that advocating the benefits of blockchain and building a brand around those benefits is very easy to communicate towards users. And looking at the financial system itself, going back a few hundred years, even more, 300-400 years, when legislation came in, and obviously it turns out that legislation wasn't enough, so you would have had to establish regulators come in place and enforce legislation to be implemented and kept. And on the top of that, in the last 50, 70, 80 years, you would have added some insurance elements as well, like the OBA in Hungary, or you would have it through the European Union. But these are basically all legal and trust-based institutions that are providing and increasing trust towards users. And with BENKER, we found that the bit that was still missing is the technological guarantee. And that's what blockchain offers. So you don't have to rely on legislation, and you don't have to rely on regulators, which is very good to be in place, obviously. And you need to amalgamate these two approaches, and that we believe it creates the full circle of guarantees. And by adding blockchain to the technology, basically as a regulated financial institution, we do not have the right, we don't have a technological opportunity to do anything else outside our blockchain. So we provide full transparency, full control, and hence full freedom and sustainability to the market and to the users, and that's what we offer. And as János said, the trust element, we share the same view. It's probably the core bit, and in the coming years, I think it will come from a backbencher, it will be a front-bench issue, I think, but technology is the one that can guarantee that. And basically, you don't have to rely on any legal or insurance or regulator interpretation or systems, which are very good to be in place, as I said, but technology will change the game. And just believe in technology and mathematics through blockchain, and things will happen as they meant to be, and as a financial institution we can't do anything else. So basically we are giving up some of our opportunities from a financial perspective as well, and giving to clients, and we want to create equality between users and financial institutions. And that's what we do with Natrix, and we do with BENKER as well.
Still trying to be provocative. So this company has been started in Lithuania, and your previous company in Estonia. So what's wrong with the Hungarian regulatory system? Why couldn't you start them here?
I have to go home, sorry. Now, so looking at blockchain, just looking at regulation itself, and that's partially referring to the previous question, the role of the regulator and how they can evolve. And as Aniko said, increasing efficiency, adding technology, and obviously growing, and regulation comes with legislation together, I think, as a market participant looking at, that's how I think it's effective. Going back 4 years, people thought that we were dumb or stupid. We want to have a regulated crypto institution. And look at what happened in the last 4 years. It's only 2 more years, I think, and MiCA will be in place. And that's, in my view, that will be the big boost to the cryptocurrency market once you would have a European Union-wide regulation. You would have, looking at Lithuania, for example, as well, they would have a very liberal approach towards licensing financial institutions, especially EMIs and payment service providers, which have changed in the last years. And looking at offering something that really creates a difference, that's something that we were convinced that Lithuania, and why picking Lithuania over Hungary, that's basically what you're asking. The majority of our workforce in Hungary, we are proud to be Hungarian, most of our innovation coming from Hungary, and we will keep on doing that because we are very proud of that. But looking at, from a talent perspective, from a compliance personnel perspective, from a FinTech environment perspective, SEPA integration perspective, direct SEPA integration, and I could name a lot of things. That's something that you would get in Lithuania. We were very much keen on working with the Hungarian regulator as well, and looked at the opportunities, but looking at SEPA and direct euro access and stuff like that, that's something that we ended up having to choose, put it this way.
I understand, thank you. Still with the topic of trust. So in this case with BENKER, trust is actually guaranteed by the blockchain on which the system is built. That's not the road that you guys have chosen. Have you considered it, and what's your way of increasing trust?
I hope you're not going to ask me about this, but no, I'm just going to. I think it's a time perspective and where you start. Like obviously what Viktor and the team is looking at is like 10 to 15 years perspective. And what we are looking at is that we have like close to 2 million customers. We're serving them day to day through like 900 physical outlets in the country. And we need to find a model where we transform ourselves to the first step, and then we see what happens to the blockchain and crypto and DeFi space. So I think for trust, what it means for us is 3 things. One is there is obviously a big push for customer attention and grabbing customers on the market from the fintechs and alternative finance as well. I think having local personalized services with physical outlets, maybe you don't need 900s, we know that, so the number is going to change, but there is research and data behind having someone to turn to when you have when you personalize the help, or when you need personalized offerings. So we see a lot of research showing that even Revolut struggles with this, like how to find a good balance between being a global challenger and having like, I don't know how many customers as of today. They have some of 500,000 in Hungary as well, but you don't have anybody to call in your own local language. So I think this is something that still matters in a country like Hungary. The second is obviously security. So as a bank, you need to be, the customers, I think at this point, maybe the most conscious care about the technology, like what is it behind, like blockchain or whatever. I think the average customer cares about it, that it is secure, it's available 24/7, and the transaction goes through, and I get what I need. So I think a bank needs to provide that. Obviously, it's on both a technological and operational question, with AFR and everything in Hungary. And the third is legislation still. So I think that having GOBA and having the local regulator behind you still matters to the average customer. And this is the mix we need to mix together with the digital capabilities that we're building. So I think combining this So having the right personalization through technology, the security and everything, I think this, I truly believe, because this is what we're working on and spending a lot of billion forints, is a working recipe.
Just one comment, if I may. Looking at going back to features elements and trust elements, we found a lot of, that was a latent need that we have found in research a while back, and I just found some research recently that actually supports our argument that an average user, we don't believe it that much cares about features anymore. You would assume that the feature is a minimum, so it has to be at least an adequate level. I'm not saying too bad or too good, but at least decent, more than half decent. But basically what clients and users are looking for is they're looking for an institution where they share values. And that's very, very important. So if you're able to create something that's, and establish a large group of people around value set that they agree with, and in our case is trust, I think that's something that technology-based trust, that's something I think it's an unprecedented market. And just referring back to the timing, I think it's still, and timing was mentioned in several discussions previously today. I think that the change will come. Hopefully not 10, 15 years, because we will have struggle financing it. We don't have MKB behind us, so we have to use private equity at this stage, and that's a path we chose. But on the other hand, just looking at mobile phones, it's a slightly different example, but it's the same thing. If you go back 20 years or 15 years, on an average phone, you wouldn't have a PIN code to enter a phone. And you would have never thought that you would need a code to enter a phone. Imagine today that none of the phones would have a PIN code to enter, and that's something you couldn't imagine how you existed back then without that security feature. And that's what we share, and that's what we believe from a technology perspective. If you're able to add technological guarantees, that's the new game changer, and for sustainability and user demand as well.
Great, thank you. Any last words, because that's all we have time for? Or these were nice last words enough. So maybe with that, I would like to thank you very much, all five of you. This was really great and full of wonderful insights. And I also would like to thank the organizers and the audience as well. Hope we'll meet again soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.